If you've ever wondered why some women are effortlessly respected while others constantly feel overlooked, it's not about looks, luck, or how much you give, it's about what you refuse to tolerate. The truth is, men don't respect women who overextend. They respect women who set the standard. Not with threats, not with drama, but with quiet, unshakable boundaries. Today, I'm going to show you 5 of those boundaries and how they can change everything. When we talk about the idea of boundaries that lead to deeper respect, one of the most misunderstood is the boundary of standards. Too often people confuse having standards with issuing ultimatums. They assume that drawing a line in the sand must come with an aggressive tone or a high-stakes threat. If you don't do this, I'm gone. But true strength in boundaries doesn't come from volume or confrontation. It comes from quiet clarity. It's not about raising your voice. It's about raising your value in your own eyes and acting accordingly. When someone sets an ultimatum, it's often a last resort, a reaction. It's usually emotionally charged and driven by fear of being hurt, of being taken for granted, or of being left behind. It says, I need you to change, or I will punish you with absence. And here's the problem with that. When you make your value dependent on someone else's behavior, you hand them the pen to write your self-worth. Standards, on the other hand, aren't reactive, they're proactive. They're not meant to change someone else. They're simply a declaration of how you choose to live, regardless of who joins you in that life. When you operate from standards, your energy becomes attractive. You're not pushing someone to behave a certain way. You're inviting them to either meet you there or step aside so you can make room for someone who will. And here's the magic. People can feel the difference. A man can tell when a woman is standing firm in what she believes versus when she's throwing a boundary out as a way to get him to comply. One is magnetic. The other is manipulative, even if unintentionally so. Imagine someone saying, I need you to call me more, or I'll stop talking to you. That's an ultimatum. Now compare it to someone who simply stops prioritizing a person, who doesn't make time for them, without a dramatic exit, without a warning. That's a standard. It's a choice to align actions with values. The second one is powerful not because it hurts someone. It's powerful because it's honest. It's calm. It's not a plea, it's a principle. Living by standards requires self-respect, and that self-respect is earned through the actions you take when no one's watching. It's easy to say you deserve better. It's harder to walk away from comfort, chemistry, or attention when it's inconsistent or misaligned. But every time you choose to act on your standards instead of just talking about them, you reinforce your internal sense of worth. And ironically, that's when others begin to see it too. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you inspire. You do that by showing through your behavior what you allow and what you don't. You don't need to shout it from the rooftops. You don't even need to explain it every time. You just need to embody it. Think about how powerful it is when someone quietly backs away from something that doesn't meet their needs without trying to force a change. It's elegant. It's graceful. It says, I trust myself enough to walk toward what's right for me, even if it's not here. This kind of boundary doesn't come from a place of bitterness or anger. In fact, the less emotional energy you give to trying to convince someone to meet your standards, the more attractive your standard becomes. Because it's rooted in peace, not control. And that peace is what people are drawn to. There's something irresistibly compelling about a person who doesn't chase validation because they already have their own. Setting standards isn't just about what you expect from someone else. It's also about how you carry yourself. If you expect honesty, are you being honest about your own needs and feelings? If you expect consistency, are you being consistent in the way you show up for yourself? Often, the boundaries that earn respect from others are the same ones we have to reinforce internally. That inner alignment becomes your most authentic power. A lot of people think that if they don't accept someone's behavior, they'll lose the relationship, and that fear is real. But the question to ask is, what do you really lose when you compromise your standards to keep someone? You may keep the person, but you lose the version of yourself who believes in her worth. You lose peace, you lose confidence, and ironically, you often lose the other person anyway, because no one truly respects someone who doesn't respect themselves. There's an elegance in not trying to control outcomes. When you live by standards, you release that need. You let people show you who they are. You allow space for people to rise or fall, to meet you or not. And you adjust your closeness based on that. not to punish, not to prove a point, but to honor the life you want to live. That's the real power. Not in changing someone, but in refusing to bend so far that you break. This boundary can feel scary to enforce because it comes with real consequences, but it also comes with real rewards. When you move from a place of personal alignment, your relationships stop being about survival and start being about connection. You no longer have to monitor, manage, or manipulate someone into valuing you because you've already done the work to value yourself. People respect clarity. They may not always agree with your standards. Some may push back, some may walk away, but the right people, the people who are capable of real connection, will see your boundaries not as walls but as invitations. Invitations to step up, to engage more deeply, to build something more meaningful. And those people will appreciate that you didn't try to coerce them. You just created the space for them to meet you. So this isn't about being hard to get. It's about being hard to forget because you lived with integrity, because you didn't waver just to keep someone comfortable, because your standard became a mirror showing others the kind of strength, honesty, and self-love that we all secretly crave. That kind of presence can't be faked. It's built. It's lived, and once it's there, it changes every dynamic you enter, not by force, but by example. ChatGPT said, taking responsibility for someone else's emotional world is one of the quickest ways to lose your own center. It often starts subtly. You meet someone, there's chemistry, and soon enough, you begin investing not just in the connection, but in their emotional state. You start scanning their moods, adjusting your tone, softening your truths, and managing your energy to keep the peace. At first, it feels like empathy, like care, but slowly what you think is love turns into a job. You become the emotional caretaker and they become the project. And projects don't build relationships, people do. There's a dangerous narrative that suggests that being a good partner means being endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. But that mindset doesn't create respect, it creates imbalance. The moment you start feeling responsible for another person's emotional highs and lows, you enter a dynamic that lacks reciprocity. You start shrinking yourself to hold space for someone who isn't showing up fully for themselves. And while it might feel noble, it slowly erodes your boundaries, your energy, and your self-worth. Everyone goes through difficult seasons. That's human. We're all allowed to feel deeply, to struggle, to be vulnerable. But when someone's emotions become a pattern of chaos that you are constantly asked to absorb, that's not intimacy. It's emotional outsourcing. It says, I don't know how to carry this, so I'm handing it to you. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to carry so much that you lose the ability to feel light in the relationship at all. Real strength in a connection comes not from saving each other, but from supporting each other while still standing on your own feet. You can hold space for someone without being their emotional landfill. You can listen without losing yourself in their storms. And the difference lies in your willingness to draw a line between compassion and self-abandonment. When someone sees that you are willing to drop everything, your plans, your peace, your emotional needs, to tend to their every spiral, they may appreciate it in the short term, but over time, what they actually feel is entitlement. They begin to expect your emotional labor, not earn it. And that shift is where respect begins to dissolve. Because you've taught them, even unintentionally, that their comfort matters more than your boundaries. But when you show up with presence and limits, something shifts. You're no longer the emotional safety net they throw themselves into every time they refuse to self-regulate. You become a mirror, someone who can care deeply, yet still remain sovereign. And in that, there's something powerful, because it signals that your empathy is intentional, not automatic, that your energy is a choice, not an obligation. People often believe that setting emotional boundaries will make them seem cold or selfish, but the truth is the opposite. It's the person who doesn't set emotional boundaries who eventually becomes resentful, withdrawn, and reactive. Why? Because they've given more than they have to give. They've made someone else's emotional well-being their full-time job and are left depleted. That's not sustainable, and it's not loving. It's martyrdom disguised as devotion. When you take responsibility for someone else's feelings, you rob them of the opportunity to grow. Growth happens when people sit with their discomfort long enough to learn from it, not when someone else rushes in to fix it. Being emotionally available doesn't mean being emotionally absorbent. It means being emotionally honest. It means saying, I see you, I care, and I'm here, but I will not lose myself in the process of trying to save you. You teach people how to treat your emotional space by the way you treat it yourself. If you constantly allow your peace to be disrupted in the name of being there for someone, you're showing that your peace is negotiable. And the moment it becomes negotiable, it becomes disposable in the eyes of others. But if you protect your emotional well-being with calm certainty, others begin to recognize its value. And more importantly, you begin to recognize your value. There's something deeply attractive about someone who can offer presence without losing their power, who can listen to pain without internalizing it, who can love without sacrificing their own emotional clarity. It creates a sense of safety, not the kind that says, I'll fix you, but the kind that says, I trust you to take care of you, and I trust me to take care of me. That kind of dynamic creates mutual respect, not dependence. And respect is the foundation on which everything real is built. One of the most overlooked truths in emotional connection is that you don't have to match someone's chaos to show that you care. You don't have to be their echo. In fact, the more you hold your ground, especially when the other person is spinning, the more you demonstrate strength. It doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're grounded. And grounding is what people actually need when they're lost in their own emotional patterns. Often, people are not even aware that they're asking too much of you. They're operating from habit, from wounds, from patterns they've never questioned. But your boundary becomes the interruption. It says, this is how far I go and no further, not because you don't love them, but because you love yourself enough to not be pulled under. This kind of emotional clarity doesn't always feel good at first. You might feel guilt. You might question whether you're being cold or uncaring, but that discomfort is part of breaking the pattern. Every time you resist the urge to overassumption emotionally, you reclaim your center. And the people who are meant to be in your life will learn to meet you there, not because you forced them to, but because they were given the space to take ownership of their own emotional experience. Some people will resist this shift. They may accuse you of changing, of pulling away. That's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And as painful as that realization might be, it's also liberating because it gives you the choice to stop performing emotional labor that was never yours to begin with. The more you live this boundary, the more magnetic your presence becomes. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've become someone who respects their own emotional capacity. And that self-respect radiates. It doesn't chase. It doesn't cling. It holds space and invites others to step up into it with maturity, ownership, and care. You don't have to overextend yourself to earn connection. You don't have to be a fixer to be worthy. You simply have to be willing to draw the line where your peace ends and someone else's chaos begins, and then live from that line, not with fear, not with resentment, but with quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't ask for respect, the kind that commands it. There's something deeply powerful about a person who treats their time and energy as something precious, not rare in the sense of playing hard to get, but valuable in the sense that they move with intention. They don't give themselves away just because someone is available. They don't overextend out of fear that if they don't say yes to every invitation or every moment of attention, they'll lose the chance to connect. Instead, they understand that true respect begins when you show that your time has meaning and that not everyone gets unlimited access to it. When you make yourself constantly available, when you're always ready to respond, to show up, to drop everything at a moment's notice, it may feel like love or loyalty, but over time, it blurs into something else. Predictability. And while predictability might be comfortable, it rarely sparks deep appreciation. Familiarity becomes routine. And routine, when not balanced by effort, becomes taken for granted. There's a misconception that if you want someone to value you, you have to be ever present, always ready to show you care. But the truth is, presence without boundaries quickly becomes background noise. People stop noticing what's always there. They assume it's a given. And when something becomes a given, they stop working for it. They stop rising to meet it. Respect isn't just about how people feel about you. It's about how they behave around you. And behavior is shaped by what you tolerate, what you give, and what you hold back. When you are selective with your time, not in a withholding or manipulative way, but in a conscious, grounded way, you signal that your life is full. that you are engaged with your own world, your own goals, your own rhythm. You stop being a supporting character in someone else's story and become the main character in your own. This doesn't mean playing games or being elusive for the sake of creating mystery. It's not about delay tactics or scripted strategies. It's about honoring your schedule, your needs, your energy. It's about letting someone earn your time, not because you're testing them, but because you've worked too hard on your own life to give it away carelessly. You've built routines, passions, friendships, priorities, and you don't drop those things just because someone wants your attention in the moment. When someone sees that you don't immediately rearrange your life to accommodate theirs, it challenges them to reflect on how they show up. It creates a dynamic where they have to be more thoughtful, more consistent, more present. They start to realize that your time is not just something to fill a void, it's a gift. And gifts, when recognized as such, are treated with care. Being intentional with your time also means having the strength to say no without guilt, to choose quality over frequency, to recognize that presence without purpose is just noise. You don't need to prove your worth by over-communicating, over-scheduling, or overcompensating. You don't need to be the person who's always one text away, who always picks up the call, who never misses a moment. Your value isn't tied to how accessible you are. It's tied to how meaningful your presence is when you are there. There's also a deeper truth beneath all of this. When you give too much of yourself too soon, you don't leave space for someone to invest. Relationships, in their healthiest form, are built on mutual contribution. It's the balance of giving and receiving that creates trust and respect. But when you're always available, when you say yes before someone has earned your yes, you rob them of the opportunity to show up for you. You teach them that you'll be there no matter how they engage. And that quickly breeds complacency. People respect effort. They respect what they have to consider, plan for, and make room for. If someone has to think about when they can see you, if they have to coordinate and prioritize to spend time with you, that investment creates value, not because you're playing hard to get, but because your time has structure, and structure invites seriousness. This principle applies to communication as well. When you respond to messages instantly every time, when you're always checking in, always initiating, always keeping the thread alive, you set a tone of one-sided. It may feel like you're nurturing the connection, but you're also making it easier for the other person to coast. They learn that you will carry the weight of maintaining things. And again, this reduces respect because people respect the things they have to contribute to. Choosing when and how to engage is not about punishing someone with distance. It's about curating your life so that only the right people have front row seats. Your access is sacred. Not everyone gets to know your thoughts in real time. Not everyone gets your emotional presence whenever they ask for it. You decide who earns that closeness based on consistency, intention, and mutual investment. The irony is, when you treat your time with value, the right people don't pull away. They lean in. They sense the difference. They recognize that if they want to be a part of your world, they have to bring more than charm or chemistry. They have to bring effort, follow through, and respect. Because you're not waiting around to be chosen. You're already choosing yourself. In a culture that praises instant replies and constant connection, choosing to be intentional with your time is an act of self-respect. It's not about being unavailable, it's about being selectively available. It's about showing up fully for the things that matter and stepping back from the things that don't. It's about making people feel your absence just enough to appreciate your presence. The right connections won't be deterred by your boundaries. They'll be drawn to them. They'll see that you're not desperate for attention, that you're not living in waiting mode. They'll understand that when you do show up, you're present, engaged, and real because you want to be there, not because you feel obligated to be. And that choice, that quiet, confident decision to live by intention instead of impulse, is what turns ordinary interactions into meaningful relationships. You create space for depth, for respect, and for mutual effort. And you do it not by chasing validation, but by holding your time and access like the treasures they are, offered freely, but never cheaply. The ability to walk away is one of the most powerful boundaries a person can hold, not because it's a threat, but because it's a quiet, unwavering reflection of self-worth. It isn't loud, it doesn't come with drama or the need to prove a point. It exists in the deep knowing that staying in a situation that doesn't meet your needs is more damaging than the discomfort of letting it go. And that knowing becomes a force that transforms how people engage with you. Many people are conditioned to hold on, to endure, to give one more chance, have one more conversation, wait a little longer. They worry that if they leave too soon, they'll miss something, the potential, the change, the happy ending. But there's a cost to staying in something that continually asks you to shrink, to compromise, or to tolerate emotional inconsistency. That cost is often invisible at first. It shows up in subtle ways, in your anxiety, in your silence, in the way you question yourself more often, in the way your standards begin to slip under the weight of hope. Choosing to walk away doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from clarity, from finally seeing the difference between effort and excuses, between affection and attention, between words and actions. It comes from recognizing that someone can like you, even care about you deeply, and still not show up in the way you need. And that realization stings, because it would be easier if they didn't care at all. Then the decision would feel cleaner, more justified. But often, the hardest situations to walk away from are the ones that are almost enough. But almost is not enough when you've done the work to understand what consistency, presence, and emotional safety feel like. It's not enough when you've promised yourself that you will no longer settle for moments of closeness between long stretches of confusion. That promise to yourself has to mean more than the connection you're afraid to lose. Because if it doesn't, then all the self-growth, all the lessons, all the pain that taught you to want more was for nothing. People often think that walking away is about giving up, that it means you didn't try hard enough or care deeply enough. But the truth is, walking away can be the most courageous decision you ever make. Not because you wanted to, but because you needed to. Because staying would have required you to abandon parts of yourself just to keep the relationship intact. And self-abandonment is too high a price to pay for proximity. The ability to walk away isn't about having a cold heart or a rigid mindset, and it's about having a strong relationship with yourself. When you trust your own judgment, when you believe in your ability to handle what comes next, you stop gripping so tightly to things that aren't aligned. You stop confusing attachment with love. You stop needing to be chosen in order to feel worthy. You begin to realize that walking away isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's a shift back into alignment with your values, your peace, and your power. What's important to understand is that people sense when you're willing to walk, not because you've told them, but because of the way you carry yourself. There's a grounded energy that comes from someone who knows they don't need anyone to feel whole, and that energy changes how others approach you. It makes them more thoughtful, more intentional, more respectful, not because they fear losing you, but because they recognize that being close to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. This is why the ability to walk away must be rooted in action, not words. Boundaries aren't boundaries unless they're enforced. You can't teach someone how to treat you by telling them how much you're willing to take. You teach them by walking when the line is crossed, by disengaging when the effort disappears, by choosing silence over arguments that go nowhere. It's in the choices you make, not the ultimatums you give, that your worth becomes undeniable. It's natural to fear the unknown that comes after walking away. You might wonder if you'll find someone else who understands you. You might worry about being alone, about missing the connection, about regretting the decision. But those fears are not reasons to stay. They're just echoes of an old narrative that says your worth is tied to who chooses you, how long they stay, or how much of yourself you gave. But your worth has never lived in someone else's ability to see it. It lives in your willingness to protect it, even when it's hard. When you stay in situations that diminish you, even slightly, you send a message to yourself that your needs are negotiable. But when you walk, you rewrite that message. You say, I will not lower the bar just to keep someone comfortable. You say, my peace matters more than potential. You say, I choose myself, not in bitterness, but in truth. Walking away isn't about being the one who wins. It's not about ego. It's about dignity. It's about preserving the relationship you have with yourself, because that's the relationship every other one builds upon. And when you protect that, everything else falls into place with greater clarity. You stop second-guessing every feeling. You stop explaining your needs as if they're too much. You stop making excuses for why the bare minimum should be enough. This kind of boundary also invites a different kind of connection, one built on respect, not rescue, on mutual effort, not emotional debt, on truth, not performance. When people see that you can walk Not as a threat, but as a reality. They approach you with more care. They don't play games. They don't keep you guessing. They rise to meet the space you've created because they understand that space could just as easily be filled by someone else. Someone who values what they bring to the table and shows it. None of this means that walking away is easy. Often it's the most emotionally complex decision you can make. It requires grieving the version of things you hoped for. It requires letting go of the story you told yourself about what could be. But in that letting go, there's also freedom. Freedom to choose again, to begin again, to move forward with a deeper understanding of what you want, what you need, and what you will never compromise again. You don't have to make announcements. You don't have to prove a point. You simply move in the direction of what honors your worth. And in doing so, you become the kind of person who never has to beg for respect because you've already shown what happens when it's not given.